Man, people really don't like this show, do they? And I kind of understand why. I've been reading some comments. Boba Fett on the show is a little too nice, doesn't really act the way that people thought he was going to act, and I kind of see their point on that one. Now that I've kind of thought about that a lot more and kind of really sat down and thought about it and given it, some proper thought instead of just watching the episode without thinking, I kind of see that point. This isn't the Boba Fett that we all knew from the past or even from Mandalorian. This is like a different Boba Fett. And I'm not a big fan of that. Now, today we're talking about Chapter 4 of Book of Boba Fett. The episode aired on Disney Plus a little while ago, and I actually did stay up, not because I was going to watch the episode, I was actually working on something else for Geekdom 101, and I was just up, and it was 3 a.m., so I said, I might as well watch it. So, this is my review for episode 4 of Book of Boba Fett, excuse me. The episode is called The Gathering Storm, and you find out by the end of it why it's called that. The first scene of the episode is Boba in the back of the tank, and, he goes back to the Sand People riding the Bantha, which I feel like is every episode. But this episode had a couple of scenes that I think some people are going to like, and some scenes they might not like. So, Boba is trying to get this, cyborg repaired, and the repair guy says no walk-ins, appointment only. And I'm thinking he's going to whoop his ass, but instead he pays, which, okay, that's fair, but people, don't they want Boba to be a badass? I mean, it didn't really bother me too much, but I can see some people complaining about that. Now, later on, we do have a pretty badass scene. So, this episode, the majority of this episode covered Boba finding Fennec and talks about how they kind of became allies, like what it actually, what led to them becoming allies. He basically saved her life, and this is how they got together. So, Boba, that leads to a scene with Boba and Fennec breaking into the Jabba's palace. And this was a good scene right here. It was awesome. Boba says that, when they break in or whatever, it's pretty much like, this is the part right here that is kind of Fennec trying to pay back her debt to him, like her life debt. And then Boba tells her when it's over, it's done. And then she's like, yeah, but I want to go along for the ride. And then he says something cool where he says, there's an advantage to people thinking you're dead. Because she asked him why, he doesn't take his ship in to get repaired or whatever, because the ship needs repairs. He's like, I do it myself, and that's why. He doesn't want anybody to know he's alive, from escaping the Sarlacc pit. So Slave One finds these guys on these speeders and just completely smashes them. This is what I think people wanted to see from Boba Fett. I think that's what they were hoping for from Boba Fett show, is he just goes in and just kills people, and just it becomes the enforcer. And actually, there's a line in the episode later on where Fennec calls him out for being soft, and he says, no, I'm not soft. She basically says the Sand People made him soft, and he's like, no, they made me strong. I don't know. The fans may have a different opinion on that. So they go back to the Sarlacc pit to find his armor, and they get caught by the Sarlacc's tongue claws or whatever. And so she drops one of Slave One's bombs into its mouth, and I was like, whoa, blown to bits. Now, after this episode, Sarlacc is dead, I guess. After this episode, I never heard anything. Well, not after the episode. After that scene, I didn't hear anything in this episode about him getting his armor back. I don't know if I missed the line or if maybe they can't get the armor back now. Maybe it's going to be followed up in another episode. I just felt like they kind of forgot about it. But again, maybe they didn't. Maybe it's going to be talked about in a future episode of him trying to get his armor. Of course, we know the whole story about, Mando and how he's, they see each other with the armor. So maybe that's going to happen soon. Maybe we'll have that scene soon, because shortly after this, the next scene they show is actually the scene where Boba Fett and Fennec kill Bib Fortuna and take over. This was the scene that was shown in the post-credit scene for Mandalorian Season 2's finale. So we actually got to see what led to him meeting Fennec and them eventually taking over. That was the flashback part of the episode. Boba wakes up from the Bacta tank completely healed. They had this scene with the Black Wookiee, and he's pissed off and he's fucking a bunch of people up at this casino type area. The owner with her big old titties shows up and he's telling him that, she will wipe his debt if he doesn't kill this guy and rip his arms off. So he rips off one of his arms. And because, Wookiees do that. We found that out in A New Hope. Let's not forget, Wookiees do that. There's your nostalgia grab, I guess, if you want to call it. That was a cool scene either way. Then he pays her anyways. He rips off the dude's arm and then gives her the money he owes her anyways. He could have got off saving that money, but he's a Wookiee, man. He's a badass, you know what I'm saying? But Boba asks him to go do a job. So that leads to the Godfather type of scene that we saw in the trailer with Fenneck and Boba Fett. And these are the other captains that worked under Jabba. Now, the reason why it's a Godfather type scene is because it's a scene of all these like mobsters, these underworld villains, these bounty hunters all gathered together to talk. And, Boba's there to make a deal with them. And he talks about the Pike Syndicate. And he's trying to recruit people to stop the Pike Syndicate from ruining the streets of Tatooine. He tells them he'll do it himself if he has to, because they're not really into helping him. So he tells them he'll do it himself if he has to, but then he asks them to remain neutral if the Pikes try to recruit them, which means that at least one of them is probably going to betray him, even though they all seem to have agreed to those terms. You know how this stuff works, man. At least one of them is going to end up betraying him and working with the Pikes, taking the money. You know it's going to turn out that way, right? At least I think it will, and I think there's a lot of evidence to show that. At the end of the episode, it's him and Fennec, and they kind of have this moment that reminds me of the end of Attack of the Clones, where Yoda says, "Begun the Clone War has," and we have that shot of like the balcony with the Emperor, or he wasn't the Emperor, then Senator Palpatine, Chancellor Palpatine, and we see Bail Organa there, we see the ships loading up. Like, it reminded me of that scene, the way the camera panned back, because Boba says, either way we must prepare for war. So he's getting ready to go to war with the Pike Syndicate. And that will likely be where the finale takes us in this Book of Boba Fett story. So I think looking back on the last 3 episodes, this one was more of the same, although I will say this one's probably a little bit more interesting because of the fact that we saw how him and Fennec got together. I like that. And I did really like the way they broke into Jabba's palace. I like that. There was stuff to enjoy about this episode. Again, I love the Star Wars underworld a lot, so maybe I'm enjoying this a bit more than somebody else would. But I do agree with the criticisms about Boba Fett being a little bit too soft. And I talked about this, in several videos in the past about how if you're going to do a TV show about an enforcer character, because that's what Boba Fett is, he is the tough, silent enforcer character. You have to be careful you don't soften him up or change him. And I think that a lot of fans feel like they did soften him up. And hopefully by the end, he will go back to his old ways, even though I feel like he's not going to because of the line he told Fennec about how the Sand People made him strong. I feel like at this point, he's going to end up being this Boba Fett. And if you like it, great. And if you don't, hey man, I kind of agree, y'all. I would have preferred to have seen this. I was worried this could have happened with this show, and it is kind of happening. At least have it be a slower burn before Boba becomes this not so deadly guy. Even though he is still deadly, he's a bit softer, than you would think. Anyways, that's it for my review. Overall, this episode was, I still like episode 2 the best. This one was probably my second favorite. Better than 1 and 3 in my opinion. What did you think? Let me know. I'll talk to y'all soon.